Welcome back, everybody, to the Malazan knitting class, or whatever that's going to be. And we're here for book 4 of Gardens of the Moon. And as the scarf grows longer, the book grows shorter. We passed the halfway point, I think. And yeah, the scarf has gotten even longer. And well, I doubt if I'll finish it before I finish my Gardens of the Moon, but we never know. Um, yeah, so obviously we also have another beer, and for today's beer we have Jever because my other box of beer was not completely full, so I had to buy another beer, and there was luckily a bit of Jever left. It's another one of those big brand beers, not your really good small brewery, local brewery kind of beer, because I don't have that right here at my local grocery store. This one's rather bitter for a big brand beer, so a lot of people don't like it that much. I personally enjoy it a lot. It's the beer of my youth, so to say. And the reason for that is that, yes, as I said, it's for a lot of people it's rather bitter, especially for kids. Like, well, when I say kids, I mean people in Germany that start drinking around, I don't know, 15, 16. And officially it's 16, obviously. Um, well, and the point is, a lot of people that start drinking beer at that age don't like the really bitter beers. I did like it. And I could always buy that kind of beer. And when my friends came by and said, like, oh, can I have a beer? And I could gladly offer them the beer. And they said, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. We don't take that one. It's too bitter. So I got all the beer and didn't come across as like a miser who doesn't want to share their beers. So that was a really clever thing for me, and that's why I have a lot of fond memories of Jever, and I still like to drink it. So let's get into Gardens of the Moon, Book 4. Cheers. All right. Gardens of the Moon, Book 4, Assassins. Yeah. Well, we already know there's a lot of assassins in Darujistan, and in this book, not all of the threads, but some of the threads converge. We meet our bridge burners again, and we meet our Darujistanis again, and they even cross paths. Isn't that fun? Like, things are getting closer to a point where actually, more or less, most of our main characters show up in the same place. But I don't want to go too deeply into the plot because, yeah, go read the damn book. It's well worth it. I hope you're already doing it. I'll still keep this spoiler free as far as I can. I'll just first drop out like a few things that I think might be interesting to, I don't know, make a note or whatever to keep in mind for later on. There's a bit of that stuff in this book, definitely. One of the big ones is Quick Ben having his small adventure in the Warren of Shadow. We learn a lot about our good Quick Ben and why he is maybe such a powerful mage while still being a squad mage. We learn that he's from Seven Cities. We also learn that he's supposed to be dead, which he apparently is not. We also learn that he is used to be a high priest of shadows who left the service under highly rebellious and irreligious circumstances. And he converses with his former god and master. This adds to the whole idea that gods within the Malazan world are basically bound by the same rules as everyone else and are inside the universe, inside the cosmos, something there that I talked about last day. And yeah, he converses with Shadow Throne. We also get like a bit more insight into Shadow Throne as a character. He seems a rather personable god when it comes to like talking to people, while still being angry and slightly mad, but can't have everything, I suppose. So yeah, that's like the big one that you should keep in, like, I don't know, reference to later on, because that will might be interesting information for later on. We also have one other thing that struck me this time round, which I really need to look into on a much higher spoiler level that I will not talk too much about here. Well, there's this one scene with Krappa is at Crocus's uncle's place and reading a old text about something. Let's just say, keep that passage in mind. It might be relevant later on. And yeah, I'm slightly worried by the timeline there. Something there doesn't add up to me, but who am I? I don't understand time. I don't even understand time in our world. Why? How the hell could I understand time in the Malazan world? So yeah, just, I don't know. Put a note in there, stick a pin in there. Maybe don't stick a pin in there if you're using an ebook, because that could damage, like forfeit the warranty. So don't do that. Anyway, that one really caught me by surprise because I had forgotten that one certain character is mentioned in there. That might be interesting. Anyway, let's go into more broader things. There's two broad things I want to talk about here, maybe three, two and a half, I think. One of them is Anomander Rake, because I forgot to talk about him before, which I'm not really sorry about, but yeah, I forgot to talk about Anomander Rake in book 2 when he shows up more. But I think maybe now we have a bit more to talk about him, so that might be more interesting. And then it's another one of those comebacks that of one of those main themes that I talked about in the previous video, in the previous book, in book 3 already, and a bit more. So one large thing that we'll realize in book 4, I think, is the fact in like how much history influences the present. Now that's something that has been there all the time, and it's not exactly news to anyone. And when we looked at the previous books, we always saw how the past of the Malazan Empire influences the actions of people within the empire now, how it puts pressures on those different actors within the Malazan Empire. But now we draw back and we see how there's hundreds of thousands of years of history there, like 300,000, I think, maybe more. When we see how the Jagged Tyrant being chained in or like buried in this barrier in this, but yeah, in this burrow, it might be in this burial mound might be like influences the present of the city of the Rujistan. Like first, he influences it by drawing people there who want to get all the power. And let's just say, yeah, that's a very human thing. Like humans can't leave power alone. They want to fuck with it, and then it mostly fucks with them. But so that's one of those situations where you see how the how history on a really broad scale that the Malazan world has influences very important situations in the present. So that's like the overarching like background to book 3. We get about a lot of this like lore and background information, world building history there. But before that, we once again have those personal dramas, and the personal dramas and are what Malazan is all about. Obviously, it's the everybody having their problems and so forth. So, what do we get here? We get, once again, the thing I talked about before in book 3. It's the idea of how to keep one's humanity in the face of pressures, outside pressures that are the world and everyday life that kind of makes you give up part of your soul, yourself, and your humanity in a way. We saw that in book 3 at that dinner with the adjunct and Tattersail and Dujak. We also see it here. It gets like put out very, very clearly by Malik. Ralik Nom, not Malik, Ralik Nom. We get that there very clearly when he reflects about what he wants to do together with Morelio to help Cole. We see there that this is another one of these possible approaches to deal with the fact that once you have chosen a course of action or a course in life, this course of life will then grind down and force sacrifices from you. And the one thing you're sacrificing bit by bit is yourself, your dreams, your humanity. And that's something that we saw with Lon when she basically pushes down all of herself to make room for the adjunct. We saw it with Tattersail when she decides that that is not worth it, and she basically pushes down all of her roles as a magician of the Malazan army, and bears her humanity, her guilt, and her pain, and tries to find a way out of that dilemma there. And we saw with Dujak, who is actually sacrificing his health mostly and his life, while attempting to keep those roles, like the role of a commander and his ideals in balance. We see that there again. Now, this time around, we see it with Rallick, who chooses another way to deal with that, and that's what I would call the Blaze of Glory approach, which is always very theatrical and seldom healthy for the person doing it. And he has basically given up on and not plans, but has accepted that he will lose himself, his honor, and things that make his identity once he actually ascends further in the ranks of the Assassin's Guild. But he thinks that's a price worth paying. If he then, before that, can do whatever he and Murillo are planning to help Cole. It's like this one last big thing that is basically all according to what he wants to do, to how he feels, his personal honor, his personal beliefs, his personal identity and humanity. And he will do that, and if he achieves that, then he feels that he can then give up and sacrifice that to his role in the future, when he will go the adjunct lawn way, I would say, just with that one big success before that. That is how he sees that in that way, and that's another approach to that thing. And I think it's important to keep all those different ways of how people deal with this in mind, because it's one of those things that every one of us also faces. And I don't know, it's like life is basically for everyone. I'm getting sort of philosophical here. It's like, I'm sorry, life life basically is sacrificing one's own beliefs, identity to the demands of an outside world. That's how it works. That's the human condition in a way. And we all need to find our own paths in there, and the Malazan Book of the Fallen, at least in Gardens of the Moon, so far, it really puts that front and center by giving us different examples of how people deal with that, how people have dealt with it, and so forth. You could possibly also look at Onos Tulan / Tool, and how the Talan Imas or Imas are also a very bold example of how it works when you sacrifice your humanity or your identity, humanity, beliefs, and everything to a greater idea, to a greater demand of the, or perceived demand of the outside world. I mean, that's basically what they are. And we see that written really bold there in their way. But as I said, I'm just rambling there, but just keep that in mind. I feel that's something that comes up again and again, and is one of the reasons why the Malazan Book of the Fallen speaks so much to me, because it's something I feel I and most of us struggle with every day. And when you can, relate your personal struggles with what you read, that's a big win. That's what I said in some other video before. It's like literature can give us answers to our burning questions of what does it mean to be human, by showing us different examples that we cannot in fact, step into ourselves in our real world. That's something that literature can generally achieve, and I think one of those questions is exactly the one that the Malazan Book of the Fall and the Gardens of the Moon show us these different answers in Gardens of the Moon, when it's like, how do we deal with the outside world's demands and our own identity when they come into conflict with our own ideals, beliefs about ourselves? Now, let's move to the other big elephant in the room. And yes, I've just called Anamander Rake an elephant. I'm not sorry. We need to talk about Anamander Rake. And we need to talk about Anamander Rake, how he's portrayed within Gardens of the Moon so far. I mean, the facts, we sort of know the facts. He's extremely old and extremely powerful and not human. And by not human, I don't mean he's a different species. Yes, he's that, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. But let's first look at how we are introduced to him. Like in our first encounter with Anamander Rake, we see him standing on that flying mountain of his, throwing down a metric fuck ton of magic onto the plane. Like, we see him as this abstract, distant, extremely powerful being, like nothing else. We don't even know how he looks like. It's like, yeah, he's dark and he's black and he has white hair. So yeah, well, that doesn't mean anything, right? And then he just like shoots down tons of magic and destroys a lot of people, or saves a lot of people, depending on what. Yeah, well, yeah, you know what I mean. So he is extremely powerful and very, very distant. And the next meeting we have is in book 2, when he first shows up with at Baruch the alchemist's place and talks to him. And he's still very, very distant and alien. He's described as very alien, and he shows up in the dark, and he's super powerful and scary, and his eyes are super alien and everything. And he's still very distant, and we are not close to him at all. Now, this time round, we see him actually... No, we don't see him actually do stuff. We only meet him after he has already killed the demon and done all the stuff. And then he shows up with Baruch. And now this is interesting when you look at it. The first time round when he meets Baruch in book 2, he just, Warren walks into his room. It's like, bam, here I am. This time round, he actually behaves like a civilized person and enters through the door. So yeah, we are getting closer to Anamander Rake, and he becomes more accessible in a way to us as readers, is how I feel about it. And this goes the other way around as well, because what we look at when we see how Anamander Rake behaves is like, he's a very, very powerful person. He's a very powerful being. He's immensely old, and this absolute, like this, the difference in power, the difference in actual power and options of acting on the world, and of actually impressing his will on the universe, has distanced him very much from other people, probably from his own people, definitely from humanity. But of course, he's not human. He's a different species. He's much older. He's much more powerful, and that has led to some issues, which we learn in book 4 now, when Baruch confronts him on how he planned to kill all the assassins and so forth, because he's using rather crude tools to deal with what he perceives as a rather crude situation, because those mere mortals down there, those humans, are rather crude beings in a way. And with that, he kind of obviously underestimates the complexity of this world. He also obviously doesn't care that much at least in book 2, when we hear about it. He doesn't care that much about it. He has his war to fight with the Empress, and the Rujistan is just the battlefield. So he just uses people and everything as pawns in there. But what Baruch confronts him to do now that he realizes that he's facing people that can surprise him in a way when Quick Ben just actually pulls out the demon, and even before that uses all kinds of magic that is more than his assassins, Rake's assassins expect. So he's forced to reassess his situation, and he's apparently smart enough to do that in a way, to realize that he has maybe underestimated the complexity of the situation that he's gotten himself into. And that's like a metaphor for like how we as humans oftentimes deal with the world. It's like we see a situation, we come up with a crude reaction to solve that problem, and that crude solution then creates more problems. I don't know, like one of those examples that comes to mind is how we like introduce one species on a different continent to solve a problem, and then that species like runs rampant, and suddenly we have like all of Australia covered by camels and rabbits and stuff like that. Just, the fact that a person with a lot of power loses touch, or loses touch and an awareness of what it is to be in that different sphere of power. That's something that is very real in our world as well. It's like people who live in a different world, basically, that have more power, more money, all those things that, well, money boils down to power. It's like people who live in a world or in a sphere where they can exert their will much more on the surrounding universe than most other people, have difficulties of understanding the complexities of that other world that they just manipulate by exerting their power. And that's something that has happened to Anomander Rake, definitely. And that's something that we see him then now trying to reconsider. And he's another one of those people that has, while gathering that power around him, while taking on the role that he has had to push his own humanity. I'm going to say humanity here, even though it's like I don't even know how to say it, Tista Andy identity, like his humanity, his personal, like, emotions and so forth. He had to push that far back, which I guess is what happens when you are in his position. It also probably makes it slightly easier to write this kind of character because, let's face it, the thoughts and inner workings of a 300, 400, how many 100,000-year-old extremely powerful being are very, very difficult to describe, fathom, and then portray in writing for someone who is, as far as we know, a mere mortal like Steven Erikson. So actually getting closer to Anomander Rake from the outside and having him as this inhuman being that we watch from the outside, that then has to sort of get closer to all the messiness, all the pettiness and everything of human life, human existence, and acknowledge that he needs to actually take that serious and not just look at it from his high elevated position that he's in. That is, that's, on the one hand, it's sort of I don't want to call it redemption arc. It's like he's trying to he has to reconnect with those like more regular normal things. On the other hand, it's also a way for the writer to actually approach the inner workings of such an alien being as Anomander Rake. All right, so that's that. One other thing I really wanted to talk about, because I kind of forgot about to talk about it before, is something that struck me about Krappa. And Krappa is, and this is not a theory because it's not a theory, but Krappa can be seen, and I think it helps to understand him and other things. Krappa can be seen as the personification, the avatar and personification of the city of Darujistan. I think that's a way to understand and read Krappa that really makes a lot of things easier. He's basically a pacifist that tries to avoid violent conflict. He is vibrant. He's full of life. He's smart. He's clever. All the things that a vibrant city like Darujistan have. With all the slightly negative parts of that as well, he's not above a little bit of corruption and everything. Anyway, like, I felt that reading Krappa as the avatar and personification of the Ruzistan actually is a good way to get into this character and the city in a way. And I just wanted to drop that here because I didn't know where to fit it, where else to fit it. Just, maybe it'll help you. All right, that's that for book 4. I'm going to go now and read book 5. And we'll see how that goes in the near future. And yeah, I'll see you real soon. Cheers.